Hello, and a big warm welcome to the Guardian Doula's Diary podcast. My name is Angela Deuce, and I'm your host and the founder of Guardian Doula. I am a certified birth and postpartum doula and childbirth educator based on Sydney's Northern Beaches and serving women and families all throughout Sydney. This podcast is an honest collection of the stories and experiences of birthing women and the professionals that support them to empower, equip, and inspire us all. Let's get into it. Today I got to chat to Karen McClay, who is the owner and director of Calm Birth Australia, which you've probably heard of. It's one of the biggest antenatal education programs in the country, so it was so wonderful to get to chat to Karen. She tells us about how her dad, Peter Jackson, started Calm Birth, and we talk about the role that our conscious and subconscious mind plays in birth, the benefits of a strong support system, and we chat specifically about doula support, and we touch on overcoming emotional obstacles in birth and how important it is to do that. And then Karen also gives us her tips for overcoming birth trauma before going into your next birth. Here's our conversation. Hope you enjoy. So do you just want to start off by telling us about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so my background is that I'm a registered nurse and midwife. So I've been a registered nurse now for over 30 years, which is a long time. Though I haven't practiced as a registered nurse now for about 15 years because I've been a midwife. So that's where my practice has mostly been, is in midwifery. I'm also director of Calm Birth, which I took over from my father, Peter Jackson, who developed the Calm Birth program in 2015. I guess the other important thing is that I'm a mum as well. I'm a seasoned mum. All my children are growing up. They're young adults now, ranging between sort of 17 and 23. So I'm coming to a time of transition as well, because I'm not as, inverted commas, needed as what I once was. So all of a sudden I've got this time on my hands where I'm sitting there going, what do I do? I haven't got any hobbies. My whole life has been my family. Who am I outside of that now? So it's a really interesting time for me, because I'm coming out a little bit out the other side of that, trying to discover who I am outside of my family now too, which is quite an interesting development that's happened recently.
Wow, that does sound so weird. I'm just sitting here trying to imagine the day where my little ones don't need me so much anymore. And I'm like, gosh, that would be so bizarre to just all of a sudden have, as you said, like time to yourself and to be wondering, like, what do I want to do now?
Oh, I know, it's crazy. Like, my youngest is 17 and she's recently gotten her Ps, and it was just all of a sudden dawned on me then that I didn't need to drive her around anymore. Like, I was literally hanging up my mum's taxi keys, and there's evenings where I'm sitting home on the couch going, what do I do? Not that I don't have enough to do. I'm one of the
Yes.
very busy people, but I don't. Yeah, I'm not used to having any spare time at all. So it's quite interesting. So I've been trying to work out things that I might like to do and visit some of those. So it's quite fun.
Wow, that's so cool. And so you mentioned about your dad having started Calm Birth. And one of the things that I was really excited to ask you about is when you were growing up, did you kind of always have this perception of birth being a really positive, really wonderful thing? Or because I think for most people, they kind of first get the narrative that's like very Hollywood of, the woman screaming her head off in labor and it's this thing to be scared of and that kind of idea. But for you, was it very different growing up?
Actually, no, not really, because Peter did his midwifery training when I was 3 years old, so in Blacktown, in New South Wales. And at the time he was really doing it to get his 3 certificates. So back when Peter trained, you got certificates depending on what you were doing. So he got a certificate in general nursing, he got a certificate in midwifery, and a certificate in mental health. And that was kind of a requirement to be kind of a well-rounded nurse, but also if he wanted to go into management, which he particularly didn't want to, but everyone else, because he was a man, assumed that that's where he was going. So he was encouraged to get his 3 certificates. When he did his midwifery training, so if I was 3, that would have been about 1977, maybe he did that, maybe a little bit earlier. And it was really a conveyor belt of women, is how he describes it. It was very medicalized, very managed, very controlled, and really wasn't a pleasant experience for the women, but also not so a pleasant experience for him as well. And he really learned that birth was a very mechanical function of the female body, and that's how how it kind of unfolded for him initially in that early training. So as a result of that, he kind of wasn't really keen to stay with midwifery. So he went into mental health, and he was in mental health until the sort of about the mid 1980s. Went back, did a little bit of general, and then we moved to the Southern Highlands here in New South Wales, which is about an hour and a half south of Sydney. And Barrel Hospital was desperate for midwives, and so when he applied for a job as a nurse, as an RN, they saw that he had his midwifery and convinced him to come back into midwifery, and said that they would upskill him, all of that sort of stuff. And it was in that upskilling, plus with him coming into midwifery with a new lens of his mental health, that he was able to see that birth wasn't just this physical mechanical process in women. It was incredibly powerful, emotional, spiritual, and yes, physical journey for them, and a real time of transition. And also for the partners as well, realizing that there were so many partners as well as the women who were coming out of birth not having experienced it in an empowering way, in a way that they were walking away going, wow, look what we did, and that really setting themselves up for parenthood. And so, of course, because he was very passionate about his mental health and really loved working in that field, when he was working in that field, he was able to bring that into his midwifery practice. And I guess that's where calm birth was born. But as a result of that, in the late 1980s, I was in year 11 and 12 at school when he went back into midwifery. And so Peter was really still finding his place in that. And I can remember joking with friends saying, oh my God, I'm just going to walk in the door and ask for absolutely everything. And then it wasn't until he started talking about what he was learning, and he was discovering people like Ina May Gaskin and Sheila Kitzinger and Marsden Wagner and Michelle O'Donnell, and all of these amazing people that were talking about birth in a very holistic way, that I started to realize myself that perhaps there was another way of looking at it. I still probably wasn't super invested in it because I was young and I was interested in going out and having fun, and having children wasn't on my radar. But then when I did end up falling pregnant with my son in my late 20s, the idea of calm birth was really starting to emerge. And I certainly went into that with a different mindset of not walking in and going, give me everything, but really learning to tap into my own power and do what I needed to do to birth my baby and bring my baby into a world of love, and find my power in that. And so calm birth hadn't quite come to fruition yet. It wasn't really until my second baby in 2000, and Ames was 2003, and calm birth didn't kick off till 2004. But certainly that philosophy was definitely around, and Pete certainly had. I'd done a lot of work with him to, I guess, move anything that I needed to move, not just consciously, but also at that subconscious level, to ensure that I was able to have really positive, empowering experiences with all my kids, actually, even though every one of their births were different.
Wow, that's incredible. Such a cool background that he has to have, like, the mental health side of things and then also the nursing and the midwifery. And so interesting to hear that he kind of went into his career not really intending to focus on midwifery, and he just fell into it. And, like, look at you guys now. It's just so fascinating.
Yeah,
Wow.
it is. Pete always talks about it as sliding door moments. He has had all these sliding door moments throughout his life, and he just seems to have been taken where he's needed to go at the time. And he's done incredible work all through his career, actually, with helping people in all different facets of their care.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Wow. So when you mentioned before about, you started to then come into a time of your life where you were having your own babies. And so you then started to think about it more and it was like relevant to you all of a sudden. And you
Mhm.
mentioned how he kind of helped you to get prepared. And you said something about, not just my conscious beliefs that I was holding about birth and what I was capable of and how it all works, but then also your unconscious beliefs. Can you
Mm.
expand on that a little bit and kind of explain what you mean by that and what that like involved for you? Because I'm so interested.
Well, this is kind of the real basis of calm birth, where we very much acknowledge that consciously we need to really understand birth to trust it. But we also have had a lifetime of downloading a whole lot of information around birth. And unfortunately, in our culture, there's a lot of negativity around birth. And those ideas and concepts around birth, and in fact, even our own births that we had when we were born, are stored down in kind of like this. I like to describe it as a filing cabinet in our subconscious. And when we go into that space of birth, and things start, it's not only our conscious thoughts that feed into the way that we respond to birth, but very much the ideas and I guess the emotions that we have stored deep in that subconscious about what our underlying belief systems are about how birth's going to go. So if we were brought up in a way that where we felt that birth was an incredible experience, it was really, really empowering, that it was just something that we did, then we would be heading into birth and we would just do it. It would have a tendency just to unfold for us. But when you're going into birth feeling really fearful about it and having been convinced that it's something that you can't trust, that it's not going, that it's dangerous, that it's you can't do it, then that's going to come up and have a tendency to sabotage us in birth. And if you look at what birth is really all about, and the space that women get into when they're birthing, their neocortex, that analytical thinking part of the brain, is really switched off, and they move into that subconscious. It's very much a subconscious, intuitive, instinctive process for women. But if they're not confident about that, they can't tap into that intuition. They tend to tap into and find vulnerabilities instead.
Yeah,
Does
it's
that
so
kind of
true.
make sense, Angela? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. And it's so common too, like what you were saying about your subconscious being so much more, I guess, prevalent than you might think, because you have your conscious thinking and you go, oh, yep, birth is this, birth is that. But then so often, especially like the women that I work with, they'll go into birth and then come out on the other side and they'll say to me, oh, it's so funny. I didn't think that I had any preconceived ideas or any hopes of how it should go, or you can say like, I'm just holding an open hand and I hope that it goes this way and that way, but I'm really open and I'm just going to let it happen how it happens. But then they'll come out of it and go, actually, I must not have thought that, because when XYZ happened or ABC didn't happen, I was quite surprised by that, or I had to really process it. And it kind of just goes to show how much we do hold subconsciously in terms of what we believe about birth, and then also what we expect from it when we experience it. And it's true too, what you said, like about we have to understand birth in order to be able to trust it. And yeah, it's so huge. It really is.
It is huge, but what's really interesting too that you find is that there's some women who will do a lot of preparation for birth. They'll listen to every possible podcast, they'll read every book possible to read, they'll do a whole lot of antenatal education, but the type of antenatal education that really only focuses on that conscious learning. And they go in there ready to go, armed to the hilt with this toolkit, and then something along the line sabotages them, and something comes up for them that holds them back, or their labor doesn't start because there's something in there that's not allowing that woman and that baby to move on past some emotional block that they may have. And this is why it's really important that we have to acknowledge what our biography is and what our learnings have been about birth, and to undertake what Pete likes to call a little bit of creative reorganization in that filing cabinet, so that those files that we have about labor and birth, and also parenting as well, because sometimes it might be something about parenting or something else, are able to be in line with how we're consciously wanting to go towards our births as well. Like, it's really, really important that you do the work on both levels.
Yeah, it's so true. There is so much preparation around, as you said, like the physical side of things. And then often it really is lacking, kind of tapping into, are you scared? Is there anything that you are resisting or afraid of? Because as you said, those things will come out when you kind of have no choice but to switch off your thinking brain and your analytical brain. When labor comes, it comes, and you do need to just tap into your instincts, and it's so primal. And yeah, it's so important that we are preparing beyond the
Well,
physical.
Yeah, that's right. And then we have this little safety committee that I like to call this little safety committee that we have in our thalamus. And our thalamus is kind of like our control center. So it's what receives all the messages that we're receiving constantly. So it receives the messages from our body when things are going on. It also receives the messages from the outside world and then directs them one way or another for us to respond in a particular way. But it's always got to go through the safety committee first. And the safety committee decides whether or not something is okay to move forward to, or whether, whoa, hang on a second, we need to be a bit worried about this. And that's why it's so, birth can be, is such an emotional process for women, because again, that safety committee is constantly looking at the files, it's looking at the information coming at us at a conscious level, but it's also then saying, well, you're telling me the birth's okay here, but the file is saying no, it's not. And it's going to constantly direct us in a particular way in response to what our body's asking of us, if that makes sense. Like, it's kind of
Mm.
really, really comes down to do we believe that birth is safe or not?
Yes. And you can tell yourself, birth is safe. I believe that birth is safe. But if you are just kind of telling yourself that because it's what you want to believe, but you don't necessarily believe it, and you haven't really gone deep and looked at your, like, yeah, really kind of sat with your
Yeah.
thoughts properly and sifted through them, as you kind of said, then it can kind of bite you in the bum a little bit later on, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see this with things, and I'm sure you've seen it, Angela, and as you mentioned actually, where you're sitting with women in birth, and these and things come up for them that they're just not expecting to have come up for them at the time. And so yeah, that you just can't go into birth without having done the preparation on both levels.
Yeah. There's a mum that comes to mind actually that I worked with a little while ago, and she had kind of completely she didn't realize that she had taken on her mum's experiences. Her mum
Mm.
had had 3 cesareans, and she had kind of not realized that she had taken on this idea that, oh gosh, if my mum had to have 3 cesareans, then maybe I can't have a normal birth, and maybe I'm going to end up having a cesarean. And it was, yeah, it was really interesting to see how quickly things started to progress again once we addressed that thought. Like, things kind of started to slow down. And then you kind of say to the woman, like, okay, is what do you think this is about? Are you feeling scared by anything? Are there any thoughts kind of that are coming that are, you know that could be working against labor? Obviously oxytocin is so important, and so when she was starting to doubt herself, then, like exactly what you were saying before, that stressed state starts to happen, and your body shuts down. You go, oh, I'm not safe, I can't progress. And so it was so cool to see when we kind of spoke about that. And she was like, I think I'm just really scared that this ends up in a cesarean. And then we were able to just unpack that kind of fear. And so quickly after we kind of addressed that, sifted through it, and then got that out the way, she started to then really quickly progress, and everything started to work again. And yeah, it just time and time again, little things like that will happen, which are not little things really, because they're very significant in a woman's labor.
Yeah.
And you can see how important it is to have our beliefs, yeah, very carefully, um, yeah,
Lined
monitored,
up in,
lined
yeah, or
up. Yeah.
in line with really what we're wanting out of that experience. But I think what's really important too is to, in the preparation for birth, not just acknowledge what we're wanting, but also addressing what we perhaps may be fearful of. So, like, when I've worked in antenatal clinics and work with mums in preparation, you get the mums in and you'd be saying to them, so tell me, what sort of birth are you wanting? What's your expectation? What are your wants? What are your desires? I don't care, I just don't want a cesarean. And it's like, okay, I understand that. So what do you want? I don't know. I just don't want a cesarean. And all they're focused on is not wanting that cesarean. And, if no one addresses that, then you certainly will know that they're going to end up in a cesarean, because we go towards what we think about. And if all they're thinking about is what they're not wanting, they're still going to end up in that, because our subconscious doesn't hear the words I don't want. It just hears what it just grabs onto the idea that we're focused on. Whereas if you sit down with that mama and you talk to her and you say, all right, well, what is it about a cesarean that's bothering you so much? Which is what you did with the woman that you were working with, Angela, and you actually unpick that and sort of say, well, let's work this out and let's see what we can do to make you feel better about a cesarean birth, and perhaps even put a plan together for a cesarean birth that would be one that would be okay with you. And then once you've done that, you've gotten the fears out of the way, and then you can say, now let's come back to your plan A, and talk about what you're actually wanting now, and let's focus on that, because we've gotten rid of those big emotions around a cesarean, that she can now shift and really focus on what actually is the experience that she's after.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, gosh, a way that sometimes I do that with the mums that I work with is I'll say to them, like, okay, let's follow the why. And so, for example, let's say it's this mum that's like, I just don't want a cesarean. I just don't want a cesarean. I'll say to her, why? And then she'll say, oh, because it's scary. And then I'll say, okay, why? And then she might say, oh, because I just don't like the idea of being cut open. And then I'll say, why? And then she'll go, oh, I don't know, because the recovery would just be really hard. And then I'll say, why? And she goes, oh, I don't know. My partner's just not that good with our first. He doesn't do that much around the house. So he's not going to keep everything up. And then I'm going to have this newborn, and who's going to look after the first baby? And so then it's like, aha, that's your why. You're worried that should the cesarean happen, you're going to be not well supported enough postpartum, and you're going to be, struggling and feeling like you're not being looked after, and it's not manageable. And so what you're really scared of is not the cesarean. It's the fear is that you don't want to be unsupported postnatally, and you're worried about what that might look like for you. So let's put a plan in place to support you really well postnatally, regardless of how your birth goes. And then it's kind of like, there's your solution. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And for every woman, there's a different reason behind it as to what's making her nervous about a particular way. And sometimes it's not even the cesarean itself, like you talked about. It's got to do with the aftermath of the cesarean and the recovery of the cesarean, and or perhaps it was because of a past experience with something that was really big, that feeds into her experience of the cesarean. So look, there's just so many reasons to unpick for women, and finding that one reason that's particular to that woman, that's individual to her, is really important, because as you said, that then allows them to perhaps let go of it and unpick it, put a plan in place, and even sometimes just vocalizing what it is, and them having that aha moment. Oh, okay, so that's really what it's about, can almost be enough to settle it down to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important to take a deep dive into all of this, and really help in that preparation. Preparation is just so important for this moment, because yes, it's only a day or two or three for some women, maybe a bit
Yeah.
longer, but it's there, it's incredibly powerful. It's this transformative experience where that woman is going from maiden to mother, and I really believe each of our labors and births are there to teach us something about ourselves, and we can't discover that if we're full of big emotions. And so we need to be really prepared and ready, so that we can rise to the occasion, find the comfort within the discomfort when we're in those challenging circumstances, because it's in those moments where we are feeling that we've got the tools and knowledge to rise to it, that we do discover those lessons that we need to learn to move into parenting this beautiful child that we're bringing into the world.
It's so true. It's so true. And like you said, people often will say, oh, it's only 1 or 2 days of your life, but it's a day or two of your life that you will think back on often, really, really often.
Mm.
And also, I think sometimes, like, when you go through birth and you conquer something that is hard, for a lot of women, it's like, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's the greatest thing you'll ever achieve. Like, giving birth is such a triumph. And so you'll conquer that. And then you go into motherhood, which is kind of the next hardest thing that you'll probably ever do, is be a mum. And
Yeah.
having come out of birth and conquered it, you get this newfound confidence where you're like, oh my goodness, I just did that. And I was so
Yeah.
much stronger and more capable than I thought. And so then when the baby's not sleeping at night, or they're screaming, or they're tantruming, or whatever it is that, whatever the challenge is that comes, you can tap into this new confidence where you go, oh, I am stronger than I might think.
Mm.
And I've proven that to myself before when I gave birth. And whether or not the birth goes how you hope it goes, like maybe you have the birth of your dreams and it was still incredibly, amazing that you did that and you feel proud of yourself, or maybe the birth
Mm.
didn't go really well and you're proud of yourself that you persevered and you made it through, and you still.
Navigated. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
you learn
Totally.
lessons that you then take into parenthood after the birth.
Oh, absolutely. And I often tell women that labor's meant to be challenging, and it's meant to be challenging because it wants you to find that power. It wants to show you your strength, because you need that strength to go into motherhood, and we shouldn't run away from it. I love that line, that saying, I don't know that anyone's ever worked out who originally said it, but it's a quote that says that your contractions are not stronger than you because they are you. And I think that's really powerful because, you know, that strength, that power that goes through women with those contractions and their labor is really their own strength, and they have this incredible innate ability to not only grow a human but then to birth it. And I just think it's one of the most incredible things and something that should be celebrated, and we should be putting every woman on a pedestal and bowing to her, which is what where we need to do a big flip in our culture around how we see birth and women and their capacities and
Yeah.
capabilities. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I love that quote too. I remember my husband saying that one to me over and over again for every single one of my births. And it was so helpful because it's true. You realize, like, oh, this isn't something to be scared of. This is my body doing this for me. This is me.
Yeah. This is you. That's right, it is you. And you know, why would our bodies be so cruel as to make something that it does as a normal physiological process insurmountable? Like, and that's and it for the most of the time. And we do know that there are some women who have much more challenging experiences than others, much more challenging experiences than others. And but for the most of us, you know, birth can unfold, you know, as it needs to if we just surrender to it and let it show us, as I keep saying, our power, yeah, and our
Yeah.
strength.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
surrendering to it is huge, isn't it? Because when you are fighting it and you are scared or you're overwhelmed by how intense it is, which I think for a lot of people, that's what they're nervous about. It's like, oh, can I handle the intensity of it? And when you are resisting that and you're scared of that, you're almost making it harder. Well, you are making it harder because, like, it's science. Oxytocin
Yeah.
literally is what helps us to manage the discomfort and manage the intensity of it really well. And so when we are stressing and fearing, we're then just producing, oh my gosh, I'm going blank. What's the opposite of
Adrenaline
oxytocin?
and
Cortisol,
cortisol.
adrenaline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's right.
And it's like,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
yeah, and oxytocin doesn't like to play with adrenaline and cortisol at
no.
all. Like, you know, it needs to be in a place where we're feeling safe and we're nice and calm and we're really well supported and loved, and that space is held really beautifully for us. And that's where oxytocin flies. And with that, oxytocin brings a whole lot of other beautiful resources with it, our endorphins
Mm,
and our dopamines and serotonins, and you know, it makes sure that we're well and truly covered for the job at hand.
yeah.
Definitely, when we surrender. But if we start to fight against it, we lose those resources. We get a whole lot of different resources, but they're ones to run away from a lion, not
Yes.
ones to birth a baby. Yeah.
Yes. We don't want to be running away from lions when we're in labor.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. I always say to my women, protect your peace, protect your peace. At the end of pregnancy, you don't need to be watching like scary movies. Just relax, be calm. And it sounds silly sometimes, like it really sometimes does, but it's just true. And it's just how it works. As you said, oxytocin doesn't want to play with cortisol and adrenaline. They're not friends. They don't mix. It's like night and day. You can't have the sun
Yeah.
and the moon in the sky at the same time. Like they're different, they're opposite. And we need to be really mindful of fostering oxytocin and creating an environment that we do feel safe in and calm in and confident in, an internal environment and an external environment. Like that has to be our inner state, and then also physically around us, our surroundings. It's all
Yeah.
so significant.
Exactly. And that's why support people are just so incredibly important. And why at Calm Birth we really value educating the partners too, because they have such an important role to play, because where midwives and obstetricians are expert in birth, partners are expert in their birthing partner, and like no one knows them better. And as caregivers and midwives and even doulas, like, you know, are very much relying on the partners to help direct their care to the birthing woman with that. So when you've got a well-educated partner, they're fabulous in that role, and really help all of us to provide the care and hold the space that we need to for their birthing partner. Really powerful, really, really important.
Yeah, it's so true. I think often when I work with families, the partners start out a little bit unsure as to whether or not they're going to be replaced on the day of the birth.
Hmm.
And I always
Yeah,
say to them, there is no way that I could replace you, even if I wanted to. And I certainly don't want to. And no doula should want to, because the
no,
relationship that you have with that woman is unlike anyone else's relationship. You know her so intimately, you know her better than anyone else. And honestly, like I'm there just as much for you as I am for her, because if I can give you tools to support her really well, she's probably going to respond really well to that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like, can you see that when you've got a really engaged partner and one that has gathered his or her own toolkit to support their partners, then often our care is really about guiding the partner as to how to support the woman, and we tend to take a little bit more of a backseat in that process. And we're there definitely for the partners to help. We're definitely there for the women as they need us too, but we can take more of an observational role and just more of a role of a guide rather than having to be totally and utterly hands-on. Though as a doula, you're very much in partnership with that partner with the role that you play, aren't you? With more of a hands-on role there. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
which is, it's so beautiful. Often there'll be that moment where the woman's in transition and she starts with the like, I can't do it, I can't do this anymore, it's too much. And then her partner will look at you like a deer in headlights every time it
Yeah.
happens, where they'll give you that look of like, is this okay? I knew it was going to be intense, but this intense? Like, is this
Yeah.
normal? And it's so beautiful to see, because when I reassure the partner and then the partner kind of calms down and goes, okay, this is normal, this is still safe.
Mhm.
And then they kind of are calm again. You just see how much of an effect that has instantly on the laboring woman. Like, it's instant. It's so powerful.
Oh, totally. It really, really is. And I guess one thing that I always talk about with partners too is they need to get comfortable with their partners being uncomfortable. Like just
Yeah.
like I say to the mum is you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Partners have to be comfortable with their partners doing a really big job and that it's intense and it's gonna hurt and they're gonna drop the F-bomb every now and they're going to say, I can't do this. And it's not a matter of them saying, oh, that's all right, you don't have to. It's a matter of them saying, no, come on, you can do this. I believe in you. Because often that's all women need to hear. They just need to know they're doing okay and they're doing it and it's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
They need to, sometimes I think partners and also us as well, I think we have to have more confidence in the women than the women have to have in themselves.
Yes. That is so true, because when everyone else is genuinely convinced that you can do it, and you feel how convinced they are that you can do it, it really does add to your own confidence. It really, really does.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. It does. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about what you love most about calm birth?
Oh my goodness, where do I start? There's just so so many things that I love about it. I love seeing the connection that's built between the couples through the class, with them getting onto the same page and really understanding and being able to celebrate um, their pregnancy and the birth of their baby. I often say at the beginning of my classes when I'm teaching them, I'm really hoping that when you leave here tomorrow afternoon, because I teach over a weekend, that when you leave here, you're actually feeling excited. I'd love to hear that word excited. And then we get to this Sunday afternoon, and I say to everyone, so how's everyone feeling? And everyone yells out, excited, can't wait, this is amazing, I really want to do it. I even had one father say to me recently, oh my God, I wish I had a uterus. This would be so cool. I wish I could do this now. And so it's just seeing the change in the couples from the beginning of the weekend to the end of the weekend, where very commonly, I always do the introduction of getting everyone to introduce themselves and tell us how they're feeling about birth and what they're wanting to get out of the weekend. And there's always those fears and anxieties that come up. Oh, I'm really nervous about this, or I'm not sure how I'm going to go. I really, I'm not even thinking about labor. I just don't want to go there. I've been waiting to do this. And to, again, using that word excited, I feel so much better. I know that we've got this now. I think is probably the thing that I love most about it, is really seeing that transformation of the couples. And even so much as at the beginning of the weekend, they're all sitting on their chairs and they're sitting as couples, but they're, not touching each other or anything initially. But by the end of the weekend, the guys have got their hands on their partners' bellies and they're holding
Oh,
hands and they're kissing and it's like, oh, feel that oxytocin. It's just so amazing and so beautiful. But calm birth, because of the powerful healing component of calm birth, that's embedded within our program, which really is what really distinguishes us from other programs. As an educator, we get that every time we teach it. So a lot of us stay with calm birth, not just for the benefit that it gives the couples, but also the benefit that it gives to us as well. Like, you know, I often have my educators say, for example, one of my educators may decide not to renew their registration for the year because they've got so much on their plate. And more often than not, usually 6 months down the track, we get a phone call going, oh, I really need to register now. I've just missed combo so much. I really need it in my life. And it's because, you know, we get that energy from it, not only from the couples, but we get it from teaching the programs and the benefits of the healing component of our program. So there's just so much. And I get to meet amazing people that are not just couples. I educate caregivers and allied health and doulas and all these other amazing people that I get to meet um, with the work that I do, and really talking to them about how we can change the culture of birth and make it one where it's celebrated, and women are again, as we talked earlier, walking out of birth feeling really empowered and having discovered their own power and strength. I think it'll change the world if we can do that. Definitely. I often say I want to work myself out of a job. I want it to be that we don't need to have calm birth anymore, because our whole culture is one where everyone's just empowered about it and we don't need it anymore. I don't think that'll happen in my lifetime, but, you know, it would be lovely to see, actually, that it's just something that's celebrated for everyone.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so beautiful. Wow. Oh, so cool. I love what you touched on before as well about how you guys really prioritize working with allied health professionals. And you mentioned about doulas and, you know, really equipping other people who are working in the birth space to be supporting women and yeah, helping them get the most out of their births. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the calm birth course for couples can be complemented by doula support.
Oh, totally. And it really does. It really just adds, because I think, I mean, your philosophy around birth and a doula's philosophy around birth is very much one of, again, creating that safe, calm, private environment for women so that the woman can get into the space that she needs to. Like, I often talk about the 3 roles in birth, and the first role is baby's role, which is to move through space. And then the second role is mama's role, which is to create the space for the baby to move through. Now, that's not just physically, but also emotionally, because if we're not emotionally open, we can't be physically opened. But in order to do that, she needs to feel safe, calm, and private. So she then needs us around her. So her partner, a doula, or wonderful support people and midwives and obstetricians, if they're needed, to come into that space and really hold that strong for her, so that she is able to create the space that the baby needs to move through. And doulas complement what we do at Calm Birth beautifully and powerfully, because that's your philosophy too. You're there to support women, be with women, and really hold that space and keep them feeling safe and calm, and helping them to see their strengths. And again, you don't become a doula if you don't believe in birth. So coming back to that point that we made earlier, where we need to believe in birth more than what they do. Well, that's why you're here. That's why you're doing what you're doing, Angela, isn't it? Because you believe in birth.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. Oh, that's so nice. That's so cool. I'd love to hear also about your midwifery career. I feel like you would just be the most unreal midwife with all of your calm birth background and just everything. Yeah, I just want to hear all about it, the highs and the lows and the lessons and the stories and just, yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's been a huge, I mean, it's been like almost 15 years now that I've been practicing midwifery, and I've practiced it in the hospital system. I'm doing a little bit of home birthing now with a good friend of mine who's a private practice midwife. And so I've kind of gone across all areas of midwifery, and I've seen the real highs and the absolute amazing thing of seeing women bringing their babies into the world, whether it be physiologically or whether it be to overcome an enormous challenge, and they've done it, and they've come out of it and said, "Gosh, we've done it." And I've had the lows and been with women when things have really gone pear-shaped and haven't been at all what they've expected or wanted or planned, and the power of being able to again really hold that space for women is so important, and it has been a real honor for me to be able to do that. And probably the biggest lesson that I've learned, and actually this is one that really came from originally from Pete. He said this to me, but it, as my career's gone through, it's just so absolutely and completely true. And that is that, you know, every woman, every mama is going to teach you something new But you've got to be open to what they teach you. And it's so true, because birth is so individual and unique to every mother and baby pair. And there's never one birth the same. And so you're always learning something new about birth. And I think that's why I love midwifery so much, because every day is different. It's always different. And where women are learning their lessons through their labours, I think midwives and doulas and those that are attending women are also learning their lessons about not just how to support future women, but I think about life as well. It teaches you a lot about life and who you are and what your belief systems are and where you sit in that whole pendulum
It really does.
of life, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It's actually crazy to the extent that that's true. It's crazy.
Oh, it is,
Yeah.
and it's so emotional. Like I often say to my friends and whoever will listen, if I'm talking about it, is that I know I need to give up my midwifery when I stop crying at birth. Like I just
Wow.
it's just such an emotional thing to see, and like they're happy tears the vast majority of the time, and it's just such an honor and a privilege to be there,
Yeah.
supporting women to bring their babies earthside. Like there is nothing like that
Yeah.
high of being there. It's quite an incredible experience, actually.
Yeah.
A real
Oh,
honor. It's not a job. It's not a
no.
job. It's very much a calling, and yeah, using that word privilege again. It
Yeah.
really is such a amazing thing to do.
It is such a privilege, and I'm so glad that I'm not the only one that cries when the baby comes out because I often say, I don't think I'm ever gonna stop doing that. Like, I just can't. I never get over it, and it's just too beautiful.
It is, and
It's
of course, all that oxytocin that's powering and surging through the woman, it's a pheromone, so we get it too. So I think we're also oxytocin junkies. I talk about that too. How, we love being there because we get the oxytocin, and then we come home and my kids know that I've been at birth because I just love them up. Like it's just I'm loving
Wow.
everyone after a birth. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a fabulous, fabulous career to be in, and I mean, it has its challenges as well. There's a lot of I guess that's one thing that a lot of us as midwives are grappling with at the moment is working in the system and helping women find their way and navigate their way through things that sometimes are not appropriate for them, and
Yeah.
it can be quite that probably is the definite challenge of it is being an evidence-based woman-centered midwife in a
Mm,
system that's not quite caught up to that yet, is can be tricky. That's probably
very.
when you talk about challenges, that's my biggest challenge is
Yeah.
yeah, is working in a system that's not quite up to date with the evidence yet.
Yeah, that's
So
so tough.
yeah.
It must be incredibly hard. Is that kind of what made you wanna go into more of a private practicing space?
A little bit, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I mean, look, don't get me wrong, I still love to go in and work. I still work casually at the hospital here. And I still love to do that and love to be there and be with women. But it's nice to go into that private space to see women birthing physiologically, well, mostly physiologically, and because it just renews your beliefs, it just cements your belief in women and their ability to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
So and you can and they just have so much more autonomy. So it's wonderful to see and to be able to practice that way when you're very woman centered, and it's about in that space it's about whatever the woman wants goes. That's how it is. And so I do really enjoy it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So beautiful. So beautiful. Okay, I would love to know if you were on a rooftop and every pregnant woman could hear you, what would you be shouting to them?
Oh, that's a big one, isn't it? Oh,
It
I'd be shouting
is.
so many things, so many things. You've got this, and just believe in yourself, but prepare. Like you've got to put the work in to prepare for birth, and it's not preparing for one way of giving birth. It's building your toolkit to be able to navigate whatever unfolds on the day. And I read something once where women spend 8 times longer preparing for their wedding than what they do for their births, and that's
Wow.
crazy because giving birth to a baby is again this transformative moment that continues on. It's challenging couple of days, but then you've got a challenging couple of weeks coming up in that postpartum period, and that birth's really setting you up for that. And you need to make sure that you really know what you're wanting out of your experience and really understanding why things are being offered to you, so you can make informed decisions. Because one of the big things that we see in the research around what constitutes a positive birth versus a negative or traumatic birth is really coming down to that informed consent, and women really understanding why things happen to them, being really prepared for for that particular birth journey, understanding the pros and cons, and what it was all about. It's just so important to ask questions, and not ask questions in labor, but to really have as many questions as possible answered about every possible thing that may be offered before that woman goes into labor, so that on the day when things are being offered to her, she's understanding why, her caregivers are on the same page as her, and knowing what she's wanting and what she's not. And so if it gets to a point that they need to offer something that perhaps she wasn't her plan A or even plan B, then she knows that it potentially is for a really good reason, because she knows that they wouldn't be offering it to her unless it was really important. So it's just you can't wing it. Well, most women, there are occasionally some women can wing it, but it's not often that you can wing birth. You've got to have your tools in place, and you have to have your mindset in place as well, and your support team as well. Well-educated support team is incredibly important.
Yeah, it's so
That was
true.
a lot to shout. Shout from a rooftop, but
they're great things to be shouting from the rooftop. They're such good things. They're so important. Yeah. And like even what you were saying about, if you are informed and you're understanding everything and you've asked questions and you've built a really trusted, like you trust your care provider, then, like if you have been working with a midwife and you know that she's got your best interests at heart and she knows what you're really wanting, what you're not wanting, and you've got a really strong trust in her, then, should something go wrong and she says, look, I know that this was really important to you, but for the safety of yourself and your baby, I really strongly recommend that you do whatever, something else, and you have developed a trust in your midwife, then it's going to be so much easier, I think, to swallow that pill of, okay, gosh, this is unfolding in a way that I really was hoping it wouldn't. So much easier to swallow that pill when you know that the midwife, when you trust her, and you know that she's not just suggesting it because she's suggesting it, or it's to make her life easier, or she was just a bit too risk averse, or no, like if you trust her and you've really developed that rapport with her, then I just think there's something about that when it comes to looking back on a birth that didn't go how you'd hoped. It feels to me like women are, as you said, less traumatized and less upset about things kind of going away from what they were hoping for, when there was that sense of trust and they did feel like they understood what was happening and they understood their options. It really, it's like the same outcome of, oh, okay, the birth didn't go how I wanted, but very different feelings in the woman.
Totally. And it comes down to support. We can do anything and get through anything if we're feeling well supported in that space. It's often trauma comes in when we're feeling that perhaps our life or our baby's life is being threatened, and we're not being supported in that space. And that really is what it comes down to: support and trust and relationships. And that's why, again, the evidence is showing that continuity of carer is just so important for a woman's experience of birth. It really, really is important to have people around you that you know and you trust. And again, we've got a system that, we do have continuity of care models out there, but not every woman can access that. And that's when doulas become absolutely a godsend, because they can provide that continuity of support and help them to navigate more of a fragmented system where perhaps they're not meeting with the same midwife or the same doctor the whole way through, and they're going to have different people. At least there's that constancy of that professional birth support there with a doula that can provide and hold that space for that woman.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's definitely something that I feel so privileged and so honored to get to be part of. Like what you were saying before, it's just such an amazing thing to get to journey with someone through such an incredible experience. And yeah, it never gets old. It's just unreal. And what you were saying too about how continuity of care is so beneficial and it's such a positive thing. But as you said, so few women actually get to access that. Even if, let's say, they get into like a midwifery group practice program and they are being seen by the same midwife throughout their pregnancy, I've often had mums where as soon as something happens and then they're not considered low risk anymore, like there goes their continuity of care because now they don't fit into that model, into that system. And it's so beautiful and special to get to be, as you said, a bit of a constant for them as their doula in that, where, you know, things might have changed or taken a turn that they weren't expecting, but then at least there's still someone who's familiar and knows them really well and is supporting them. And yeah, really does make a difference.
Oh, it does. It totally makes a difference. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Really that support. Women can do anything when they've got that support there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. It's so true. Oh, Karen, thank you so much for your time. I just have one more thing that I wanted to ask you about. So, as you
Mhm.
know, we did that little Instagram post where we asked if anyone wanted to ask you questions, and so there was a little bit of a theme around having had a traumatic experience with a previous birth, and
Yeah.
then let's say you've had something's gone wrong or whatever, and you felt quite traumatized coming out of that. There were a few people that asked kind of what your advice would be to navigate that same, like, yeah, what would your advice be?
Mm. Again, it's all about the preparation. I think initially what they need to do is process that. So if they have an opportunity to be able to debrief their birth with a perinatal mental health counselor or psychologist or someone to have a little bit of a chat about it and debrief it. Not don't I think sometimes we can stay in therapy too long where all that happens is we keep going over it and over it and that just keeps reinforcing that trauma. But I think it's really important to come in and and have a good debrief, process it, and get questions. And then with their next birth, put all that aside and prepare and really make considered decisions about what type of birth they want to have next time. And they need to kind of do that before they're falling pregnant, because as we know, depending on the type of birth they want, it's going to be really important to pick the right care provider for that. So if a woman is perhaps she's had a traumatic experience, is wanting to have a more medicalized birth the next time, or perhaps an elective cesarean, well then going in and having an obstetrician is fabulous for that, and you can really build up trust and relationship around that. Whereas if a woman is wanting to have a more physiological birth, then we certainly know that midwifery continuity of care is the way to go, be it an MGP program, getting into an MGP program at their hospital, which is a midwifery group program, or caseload is another term that can be used, or whether they actually decide to go with a private practice midwife and look at birthing at home, although some private practice midwives have got admitting rights to hospital, so it doesn't even necessarily mean they have to birth at home. They can still birth in hospital with their private practice midwife. So it's really about that consideration. And then what they really need to do is re-educate themselves and really dive into and prepare for the type of birth that they're wanting to have. So if they're deciding next time around that they're wanting to go for that physiological birth, perhaps it's a vaginal birth after a cesarean, they've really got to, again, make sure they've got the caregiver, but prepare and really understand it, build their toolbox up. But a lot of what we were talking about before, Angela, really getting rid of those files about their previous labour and doing some subconscious work as well. So we actually get a lot of couples coming to us with their second, third, even fourth. I've had a woman that came to us for her fourth birth, that and I love it when women and couples that have had babies before come, because you can see them in the class with all the pennies dropping. So there's a lot of that conscious information that they're getting in the tools, but then they're also doing that deep subconscious work as well, and they're able to actually move past their previous birth and move towards the birth that they want, knowing it's going to be a different experience. One thing I can reassure every woman is that their next birth will always be different.
Yeah,
You've got a different baby on board. It's going to be different. But what you need to do is prepare for it so that you've got your confidence back. You're back on your game for it, and
yeah,
you're ready to go. And there's a lot of lessons that they've learned in the last labour, which is what we're talking about. And to really look at them and think of all the things that went well and the things that you want to change, and what do you need to do to make those changes. So it's in that preparation that's really, really important.
yeah. And it cuts both ways, what you said about, you know, every baby's different and every birth is so different. Like I sometimes will see women have had really, really easy, I mean, I don't think any birth is easy, but you know
No,
what I mean?
straightforward,
A
straightforward.
relatively easy, yes, straightforward birth the first time. And then sometimes they kind of go, oh, great, my body's just really good at this, which all of our bodies are good at it. Like we're made for it. But I think they maybe get a little bit like lax, and then their second birth can sometimes be different, because often they are, every
Yeah,
baby's different. It's a different thing. And then that's where sometimes the trauma happens, where they just think, oh, I've done it before, so I don't need to prepare or get in the mindset again. But you do. Like, I think it's still important that even if you've given birth before and it's been great, you still have to get into the right mindset and prepare for it, because it's a different experience all over again.
absolutely. You've got to prepare for every birth like it's your first, because
Yeah.
it's a different experience. And we'll often see it too, where women will have come and done combo for their first, they've had a really positive experience, they fall pregnant with their second, and I think, oh no, it's all cool, they don't do much prep because they did it with the beginning, and things don't quite go as well as what they had hoped, and so they come
Yeah.
back and either do the full course or they'll do our refresher course for their third, and
Yeah.
realizing that they needed to have really done that for their second baby. So it's, you've got to prepare, and again, it's only a couple of days in your life. So, and if you're only doing it every couple of years, you need to go back over it, you need to revise it, you need to get back into
Yeah.
that headspace, into the swing of it, to be able to, repeat that positive experience, knowing that it's going to be different anyway.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think sometimes people will say, oh, but antenatal classes are expensive and doulas are expensive. But I'm like, birth trauma is expensive. Like, I'd rather spend the money on prevention than cure. Like, it's just,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. And I mean, everyone's happy to go out and spend a couple of $1,000s on a pram, but
Yeah.
whereas really good quality education, and at Calm Birth in particular, the skills that you learn are not just for birth, they're actually life skills. So, we put a lot of focus on the relaxation response and breath work, and really helping couples to change their relationship and responses to stress. So, and birth is not the only time in our lives that we go through stressful situations. So a
Yeah.
lot of the tools that we talk about in Calm Birth are very applicable to everyday stress, anything that we experience in our life. So it's really equipping them with a whole lot of tools to take into their parenting journey, as well as just for birth.
Yeah. You'll use it when you're in the throes of labor, and you'll use it when you're in the throes of toddler tantrums. And you need to do the breath work then
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah, going to the dentist. We often get stories back saying, "Oh, I did the calm breathing when I was going to the dentist," or "I really hate flying and I just can't breathe my way up and can't breathe my way down," and it was just amazing. It just completely relaxed me. And I've even had a woman who had OCD that was getting quite bad because it continued to escalate in pregnancy, and she rang me 2 weeks after the class and said, "My OCD's gone. Like, it's just seems to have just gone." So it's
Wow.
quite amazing. Again, I think that's the power of calm birth, is it's not just for birth, it's life skills that they're learning and that we talk about.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I even had one dad taking notes about when we were talking about the headspace component of calm birth, and he was writing loads of notes down, and one he came up to me and just was laughing, saying a lot of what I wrote down was what I needed to take into my parent-teacher interviews that I was about to go into, because he was a teacher. So he wasn't just writing it down for how to support his partner, he was thinking about how it's going to deal with these difficult parent-teacher interviews he was about to head into.
Oh,
So,
that's
yeah.
so cool. That's so
Yeah,
good.
it is. It's
Oh, I
it's
love
really
it.
cool. I mean, Peter, my dad, Peter, has given so many women, and also us who practice calm birth, such an incredible gift. Like, it really, it's changed so many lives for the better in such a big way. And we're 20 years old this year, which is just so exciting. And I think we worked out there's about between 50 and 55,000 couples that have done the calm birth program, and so
Wow.
that's quite a legacy that
It
Pete
is.
carries.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's massive.
yeah, he's a remarkable man. He still teaches for me. He's 80. He's just turned 81. Yeah, just turned 81, and he still runs the refresher classes for me. So
That is
he's amazing.
incredible. That's so
Yeah,
cool. I need to get myself into one of those refresher classes with him.
yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
cool.
beautiful.
Oh, so good. Thanks so much for joining us today. Karen is such a wealth of knowledge and experience. I hope you got lots out of this episode. Check back in on Monday for the next one.